Hello, founders. Welcome to Startups.com. We are live coming to you every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Tuesdays, today's the day we do pitch decks, and Wednesdays we do traction hacking, and Thursdays we do an AMA. But today it's the pitch deck reviews, and we ask not only what are the chances of you getting funded, getting an investor, and how you can improve your pitch deck, but does it unicorn? Does it actually get out there? It's a question that we all have to ask, and I wanted to load this up and let everybody know. Use the Q&A box or chat to ask questions. If you are with us live, thank you very much for joining us. If you want your own pitch deck review, just contact us. Leave a comment on this video. While you're there, like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube thing. It's always appreciated. And I want to spend a little bit of time just to get a little housekeeping out of the way before I introduce my partner in crime here, Startups.com. This show is brought to you by us, and we have a wonderful resource, Startups.com. And, Will, I want to ask you, you are the CEO and the founder of Startups.com. Curious, for everybody out there, what was your original vision for Startups.com?
It wasn't to build Startups.com. I had just come off my last startup. This was like 13 years ago. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And that's always a big question. And I didn't actually know the answer. And so I started to chip away at it like I do with everything. And I said, well, what would I do on a Saturday? Okay, I use that as the proxy. That would be something I would love to do every day. So I figured if it's something I enjoy doing on a Saturday, right?
Sure.
And it turns out on a Saturday, I love going out to dinner with friends. Most of my friends are founders. And we just sit and bullshit. We talk like sports about founder stuff all day, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I just want to do that. Like, I don't know what that is. I don't know that it's a job. I was like, I know investors get to do that, but I don't want to be an investor. It's just builder. I'm not a funder. And so I said, I'm going to figure out how to build some sort of business that involves me bullshitting with founders all day. And here we are.
And that's where you ended up with Startups.com. Now, Will, I can say that I have met many of your founder friends. I really appreciate you tracking me around. And you not only talk about startups, well, you guys talk a lot about college football as well. That's kind of a...
Well, it helps. It helps when the greatest team in the world wins a national championship, Ed. I mean, there's really nothing else to talk about at that point.
But I wanted to make a comment and say, Will, just a testament to what you've done, and I appreciate being part of it, where you've just created sort of a community where everybody gets to talk about the stuff that nobody talks about. Like, we're on other social media platforms like Reddit, and, I'm on YouTube, and just the ability to come in and have a conversation about a lot of these topics that aren't common in sort of, general squares or forums.
Yeah.
Share a little bit about how we go about talking with founders about these topics.
I'm like, Ed, I know you're as much as I am. I'm a no bullshit kind of guy, which isn't like I want to offend people. That brings me no pleasure. But I want to tell people how this stuff actually works. Like, like the meat and potatoes. Like when somebody's struggling with their startup, I'm like, oh, things are going to be better someday. I hope they are, of course. But I'm like, this is the path. Right? The struggle and the pain that you're feeling, this is the path. And there actually isn't another path. And so a lot of this is kind of a validation, Ed, of telling folks, even when things are shitty, that, this is part of what we all go through. And you have to make it through this. You have to motor through this in order to get to the other side. I think it helps for people to hear that. It's not, hey, you're not doing good enough. You're doing just fine, but you're going to go through this crappy path until we get to the other side of it. I think it helps to hear that.
It reminds me, when I was raising my kids, I'm still raising my kids, they're teenagers. But one thing they complimented me on was this thing that I had, and I learned it from Angela Lee Duckworth. She does this TED Talk about grit, and she has this thing, one hard thing. So everybody has to be doing one hard thing. And so I'd make them all pick one hard thing, right? And you have to be working on it. And then, one of my kids, they picked learning piano. And I said, okay, you have to stick through it until, you really learn something. And while, my youngest was practicing, like he just threw up his hands in frustration, and I went and sat beside him. I said, you know what you are feeling right now, that emotion is perfectly normal with the one hard thing.
Yep.
So you signed up for this, and let's continue to share and work through how you handle the emotion versus, oh, I just want everything to be easy for me and just, get there. And I think it's the same thing. You just brought it up. The way that we talk to founders is we don't have a problem talking about the hard things that they're going to go through and saying, hey, you're going to get used to it. This is your life.
Yep. And I think it helps. I wish somebody had told me that early in my career, right? When I just felt like an absolute fraud the entire time. And someone would be like, how else would you feel? You're building something that's never been built before with a team that you just put together in a market you just invented with no experience whatsoever. How would you not feel like a fraud? That's called being a founder.
Yeah.
So I think being able to have those discussions helps.
Absolutely. It's that imposter syndrome, man. It creeps up on everybody. It's completely normal.
How could it not?
Yeah, welcome to the show. Once again, we're doing pitch deck reviews today. We're going to ask, does it unicorn help you improve your pitch decks? For those of you who are in the audience, reminder, use the Q&A box or chat to ask questions. We have a lineup, Will. I've got so many pitch decks. We can spend all week doing this. But for those of you who want your pitch deck review, just contact us. We'll get you in the queue. Priority goes out to Startups.com members. As always, we appreciate you spending time with us. Will, I got a good one for you today, and we sort of had an ability to take a look at it. It's called Helios Nexus. I like the name. Just saying.
I do like that name.
Go solar without door-to-door salespeople. So we've got this cover page right in front. What are your initial thoughts?
Couple of things. I do like that the imagery actually syncs up the product. It's funny how often that's not the case. The disclaimer at the bottom, I don't know whose lawyer convinced you to that. I've seen 50,000 pitch decks. I've seen 3 disclaimers ever. So for what it's worth, that is not standard fare. Same thing like when people on every slide, they put confidential. Your pitch deck is not confidential. you're sending it out to random strangers. There's nothing confidential about your pitch deck. This is why nobody signs NDAs and all that other good stuff.
Hang on, Will. Let's talk about that for a moment, because we actually had one of these scenarios come up where there's a pitch deck and then the founder said, I don't want to show my pitch deck because it's got my business model. It's got all the stuff, in there. I just want to give them kind of the upfront commercial. And then I want the investor to come to me and I'll present my pitch deck to them, but I'm just going to give them the 30-second elevator pitch, and then I should be able to get a meeting with them. That literally was what they were thinking, because they were worried that they were giving away confidential information ahead of time. What is your response? Because I know my response. What's yours?
Investors see thousands of pitches. They're not sitting there going, boy, I hope we really get one that we can steal, right? And Ed, I don't know about your experience on this, man, but I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've worked with thousands and thousands of startups. I have never, ever, ever even heard of someone getting their idea stolen. Like where does this come from?
Yeah, well, actually, I have seen the opportunity get stolen, but that's a big but. Everybody's working on the same problems. Like you throw a rock and hit 24 founders working on the same problem. And so I'll be just straightforward. Like when I was a GP and when we were running our fund, I was not allowed to sign NDAs, say anything about confidentiality. Right. Because again, I see so many pitch decks, and if you show me a pitch deck in one industry, I guarantee you I'm seeing 10 others that week. Right. And so it's impossible to control that. I just say, if you really feel strongly about certain confidential information in there, don't put it in your pitch deck.
Yeah, don't put it in your pitch deck, right? If it's like, well, if I tell you what the product is, I'll blow confidentiality. So you're saying you're not allowed to publicly say what the product is? How do you plan on selling it exactly?
Yeah, exactly. So, or work in stealth and be one of those founders. I've seen some people do that, but hey, we are trying to optimize your chances to get investors out there. So it's good to have that conversation. So outside of that, Will, I'm curious. My opinion here, go solar without door-to-door salespeople. I kind of get it. I kind of don't. It's ambiguous for me.
It implies you know what that means.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say I want to go solar. I understand the value proposition there. I'm building a new house, so I've been thinking about solar. But without door-to-door salespeople, why would I care about having door-to-door salespeople? Is this saying that I can sell without having door-to-door salespeople, or I can buy without having door-to-door salespeople? Not clear.
Right on. Okay, so first page, the problem. So I always want to point this out, everybody. I love it when they follow our format. You got problem nice and small in the corner. Homeowners seeking solar panels often rely on unaffiliated door-to-door sales reps for quotes and designs. As a result, they face high-pressure tactics, inflated prices, delayed quotes, and minimal support once the sale is complete. And then we got a whole bunch of facts and data down here, which I believe is relevant. But here's the top main summary sentence.
To be fair, if you've got a bunch of important points at the bottom of your problem statement, they should have been in your problem statement.
Exactly.
At which point you're restating all this information, it means you missed something, right? Also, there's a bunch of fragments on here, of these points at the bottom that only make sense if you already know what the business is. In other words, average sales commission in solar is $4,000 to $6,000. How does that all relate to homeowners' ability to buy solar panels, right? It doesn't. But here's what happens. As the founder, I already know what the whole business is. I already know what this movie is. So I already know that that's going to be important later. So I give you this tidbit of information as if you already have the context for why it's there. Happens all the time.
For me, Will, immediately, we talk about this all the time, is who are you solving the problem for? So right now I've got 2 options. I've either got homeowners, their problem is they don't know which solar panels to buy and it sucks. Or I've got manufacturers or people actually selling the solar panels and they have a hard time marketing, and so they use door-to-door salespeople, which doesn't help their business. But we're kind of in this weird, wonky middle, and that's where the confusion starts to happen. And that's the clarity I'm looking for as an investor.
Well, beyond that, Ed, this doesn't open up with the amount homeowners are spending. I want this to open up with homeowners spend $24 billion per year on solar panels, but often rely on blah, blah, blah. I want to know how much money is in play right from the jump. And I think that's easy to do here because it's obviously going to be in their total addressable market slide.
Right. And on top of which, if we can actually put a price about the severity, if this problem's not getting solved, this is how much it's costing, maybe they're losing money on the table, solar panels could have been selling double, the effect if there was a better sales. It just, as you say all the time, well, try and put a dollar figure on how painful this problem is. And that's just going to excite the investor that much more.
Yeah. Also, I like the fact that they talked about the pain points, high pressure tactics, inflated prices, delayed quotes, minimal support. What I like about that is that it tells me exactly where we're going to solve the problem. I think that's useful. By the way, Ed, I tend to bold those things on my decks, things that I want to make sure people will sort of remember so I can carry it over to the solution. Now, the thing, they rely on unaffiliated door-to-door sales reps. Unless you understood the solar industry and how it's sold, it would be kind of hard to understand what that means.
Yeah, right? It's not clear.
Like, unaffiliated to what? Again, I've been through this process because, we were looking at solar ourselves, and it is wonky as hell. Like, what ends up happening is you go online, there's a million places trying to steal your lead volume, and you get hooked into one of these things that's like a calculator or something like that. They pull you in, they're basically trying to sell your lead off to one of these brokers, and these brokers stand between like the actual solar providers and installers and stuff like that. So it's a whole racket.
Let me add to that as well. And this is where I've got some inside experience. So I actually helped a geothermal. I think, Will, you're doing geothermal, aren't you?
Yeah.
Right. So I helped a geothermal manufacturer, and the sales process of working through installers and their reps that go door to door and trying to figure that out, it was so disjointed and so horrible that the customer ended up just having a horrible experience. And they believe that geothermal was not proliferating the way it could be because it was such a bad sales marketing platform that existed out there.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it, but the process was a nightmare.
Yes. Okay. So we've got inside information, like we've got familiarity with it, and that's going to help it out. But at the same time, you can't assume that the investor has that knowledge.
Yep.
Let's take a look at the solution. Helios Nexus provides instant solar quotes and proposals in seconds, not days. Homeowners get accurate system sizes, transparent pricing, and lower costs by avoiding third-party sales companies. Helios Nexus also handles permitting, installation, and ongoing support, creating seamless solar from start to finish. That's a big mouthful there. It's got four bullets.
Ed, close your eyes and read it back to me.
Helios Nexus Solar. That's literally
That's the first time we've done that, Ed. That's the first time we've done that. And I think I want to record just that clip and just play that every single time we go try to explain why brevity matters in a now granted, we're recording a video. Obviously, you weren't ready to remember this. But that was the point.
That's literally what I would do. Is a great demonstration. Now, okay, to be fair, I can see what this founder is trying to do is, we always say, if you point it out in the problem, you got to make sure you solve it in the solution.
Everything's got to map back.
Right. So I think the attempt is there, but you just demonstrated that, whoa, we've got a lot going on.
I used to run an ad agency, and at the agency, we had to write copy for all types of different ads. Okay. Anything from journal ads to commercials to billboards. And billboards were always the hardest to write for because you only had 6 words that you were allowed at most, right? To write good, compelling copy because somebody's driving right by, they look over at the billboard, they have to nail it. You can do it in 3 words, even better. Pitch deck slides work exactly the same. People are flying by like you just saw Ed do, okay? And he's presenting this content, right? Like he has a vested interest in reading it, and he already spent time in the problem. Like, in other words, this was already top of mind for you, Ed. You were prepped for it, right? And this has nothing to do with you. It's really hard to get a smart person to remember anything, right? And so when you pack on more and more content, let's go back to the slide for a second, Ed. When you pack on more and more content, like we've got 1 sentence, 2 sentences, 3 sentences, way too much. And then we've got a bunch of, kind of call outs and checkboxes at the bottom. I understand what you want to say, and it is important, but the best way to say it is in as few words as possible. And Ed, what is our cheat code whenever you want to take a block of content and make it shorter?
ChatGPT, baby.
Yep. Put it in GPT and say, the prompt is write this in half the words.
Okay.
And when it does, good.
But here's the thing. Everyone, I just want to demonstrate what Will brought up, okay? If you look at this, we've got, as far as concepts, quotes and proposals, 1, okay? Accurate system sizes, 2, transparent pricing, 3, lower costs, 4, avoiding third-party sales companies, okay? I'm going to clump that in there. And then also handles permitting, installation, ongoing support, and then a seamless experience from start to finish. So this is what happens when you get overloaded. But, Will, I wanted to point this out, and I think you're going to agree with me. If we go back to the problem, it occurred to me that they were highlighting, this founder was highlighting the unaffiliated door-to-door people, right? And the issue that it does. So then I'm using this to demonstrate then why bring in all these other concepts. Prioritize. This is the advice that you get. Prioritize and pick. You get to pick one, maybe two, and just focus your deck on that.
You bet. Because frankly, if the top two things don't resonate, then the next 10 won't make a lick of difference. It's kind of like nobody goes onto a car lot because they need a new car stereo. They go into a car lot because they need a car, right? That's the primary reason they're there. They're making a car decision. And then they're saying, okay, now I want a car. What about the stereo? What about the heated seats? Stuff like that. Your job is to sell the car, not the million other features that come behind it. The main reason people are on the lot to buy your product. So in this case, if it's they want to avoid high pressure tactics, then we avoid high pressure tactics. If it's they want faster quotes, we give faster quotes. If it's they want to save 30% over what they'd pay elsewhere, then we save 30%. It's one of those, maybe two of those, just not three of those. It's not 10 of those.
Here's a comment that we got from chat. Literally just did a pitch to a VC this morning. Congratulations for getting that VC pitch. We know how hard this founder works. And they had only read the first 4 slides. Even with a meeting schedule, they don't read the whole deck. They ask questions about the things in the deck, which they could have read. This happened multiple times. The first 4 slides are most important. Will, confirm or deny?
I'm surprised they read 4 slides. I mean, I'll be honest. Like this is what we try to say over and over and over. Here's how folks think a deck gets digested. I send it to the investor, and the investor takes this as if they're a college professor reading a thesis paper, or they're a mortgage loan processor making sure everything is checked, right? They don't give a shit about your pitch deck. All they care about is, oh, okay, that's an interesting problem. Solution's kind of interesting. Let's talk about it. And why is that? Because they're going to do 1,000 more of these. What they're not doing, and this frustrates founders to no end, is going through line by line of this thing and just contemplating and thinking, oh, well, what about that served market? Or wait a minute, what do you mean the social media manager has 2.5 years of experience? That's amazing. Like, no one is going into that level of depth. In the same way, you don't scroll through your social feed and just sit on each and every post like, oh my God, you ate what for lunch? You've got to be kidding me, right? Look at that photo.
And we got another comment here. It went really well. They love the concept, by the way. Thanks to you guys. Yes. Hey, listen, to this founder out there, you're the one that's put in the work. We were just helping guide you.
No question.
It's a total slam dunk there. But Will, let me just rip the Band-Aid off, be totally transparent. As a GP associate scout when I was doing all those roles. Okay, yes, I did read the whole deck. If you got a call from me and said, let's book a meeting, but by the time you get there, I've totally forgotten everything.
100 other decks.
Exactly. And so literally, I expect you as the founder to be able to pitch it to me again with that brevity in mind, like we're from scratch, because I'm watching you to see if you can pull it up. And you have to drone through paragraphs of text on your slide, or you can't give it to me in a real concise elevator pitch, then I'm going to start thinking maybe this isn't, the founder that we're looking for.
And you know what I do when I'm giving my pitch, when I raised VC for my last 3 companies, what I do is I try to get through like the problem solution fairly quickly. And here's what's most important. I don't try to motor through the whole deck. I think the biggest mistake when people go to pitch is that they feel like they only get a passing grade if they've made it to the last slide. That's not how the conversation works. The way the conversation works is, as you're presenting, you're engaging your audience. You're asking them, does that make sense? You're asking them, do you have experience with that? You're trying to get them to ask questions. The worst thing that can happen is you go through your entire deck, no one stops you or no one asks a question, and you get to the last slide. That is the worst possible outcome.
Yes, spoken from experience for sure. So then, Will, let's give this founder a recommendation. What would you recommend they do with this solution slide?
Okay, so we have to pick 1 or 2 things that we're solving. Now, that doesn't mean in the rest of the deck we can't expand that where necessary. We can sometimes touch on it and how it works. We can talk about it in market expansion. There's different ways to kind of like tell the bigger story. But the goal here is to tell the least amount that makes this compelling. Back to writing for a billboard. The easiest thing to do is just write tons of text. That's the easiest thing in the world. The hardest thing to do is narrow down only the most important words. If you can have your solution be 1 sentence, you win. The goal isn't to fill the deck. You're not creating a brochure, okay? The goal is to make it memorable. And memorable typically means less words.
Let me give it a shot, Will. Tell me what you think here. So imagine I said the problem is there are, 30 million homeowners who want to spend $25 billion on solar, but they're not because getting a quote, going online, they don't know where to buy, so they just decide not to do it, okay? So that's the problem. And then if I said, our solution allows you to go online, get a quote, and it's accurate and all those things without having to talk to an affiliated person that come to your door, all from the comfort of your home. Pick your best, like you literally get to go shopping online. Bada bing, bada boom. That's your solution. What would you say?
I love it. And what you're doing is you're creating a conversational tone. I think when people create their decks, they create a business tone. A business tone is like what you get in a very kind of stoic web page, right? Or an old school like brochure, right? It's very business speak. And the best decks are more colloquial. The best decks are like a sentence that nails it home, right? For example, when I was raising for one of my last companies, a company called Afford It, which is essentially what Affirm or Klarna is today, I would say my problem was this: 40 million people who go to spend or have an expense more than $400 can't afford it. 40 million people that have an expense over $400 can't afford it. Like okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Stop there. Now there's 100 other things I can say, but dude, 40 million people, $400. Now here's the funny thing, Ed. When I started presenting that, right, I had a far more complex version, right? And the consumer credit markets are so unfavorable to people who have blah 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 blah. No one cares about any of that, right? All I heard was 40 million people, $400. Okay. My solution is we allow anybody to buy something over $400, weekly payments of $20 or more, right? Super simple.
Yeah.
Right now, do we have like complex actuarial stuff that we do? Yes. Who cares if you don't understand two concepts? One is that there are 40 million people who can't afford $400, which, by the way, I'm going to go back to that in a second. And that the way to solve that is for $20 a week. Then does it really matter that you understand like how we're doing complex modeling for credit and things? Like, no, right? Because you don't care about what we do. Now, here's the funniest thing, Ed. I'll just throw this out there because I think it's hilarious. I go out and I go to the top VCs on Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, and I present this, and they look at me like I have two heads. They're like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "How could 40 million people not afford $400?" And this is my opportunity to make fun of VCs. I think to myself, have you ever had a job with a name badge? Because I guarantee if you have, you understand this problem awfully well, right? And these are all folks that went to Stanford, Harvard, probably never had a job that pays per hour, and all have Amex Black cards, right? They don't understand that the average person, right, doesn't have a ton of cash. And I had to like prove that was true, which was mind blowing to me, but you can't forget your audience.
You said two things, and I want to double click on them because it's like gold. Like just mic drop moments in there. One, you made it conversational, but you included facts. You weren't like, oh, I'm starting this conversation by saying so-and-so industry is broken, right? That's, a typical thing. Sure, that might be a conversation starter that gets somebody, uproarious about something, but investors, that's not for them. So you actually put in numbers and factual data, which is super important. Second is this is always got me. If you can tell me as an investor a novel insight of a problem, and here's how I test. If I'm sitting with all my investor buddies and my investment committee, and I'm sitting around, they're like, hey, Ed, what deals have you looked at lately? And I go, did you know that 40 million people can't afford a purchase of $400 or more? And they will literally go, what do you mean? Right? And then bang that conversation. And I know I've got them hook, line, and sinker. And I'll say, this kid has got this whole thing figured out and how he's going to finance. That's crazy. Like that would have been, it's a no brainer now. But back then, everyone at the table would have been like, are you serious? Like, how is this going to work? Right.
I know.
That's the conversation.
But so let's take that to this deck. I think there's something cool like that. Right. I think we can say, because I think later in the deck, I scanned it briefly, but I think later it talked about like how many people how many homes would be eligible for solar power, et cetera. But this, like, I might open it up by saying, do you know that the average homeowner spend $28,000 on new solar panel system when they should have spent 19?
That's a good one. Yep.
Right. And instantly the response from any human would be, damn, you're saying all these people are overspending by $9,000? Yeah, here's why. Because they're getting a sales rep that comes in as a middleman that just inflates the price, gives them high pressure tactics, et cetera, and essentially has them walking away paying way too much money. Now, does it also mean they get crap customer service and they get turned off and they get a slow quote? Yes, it does. It means all of those things. But it doesn't matter. What's driving them to buy through us is because in all of our ads, we're saying you're about to spend 30% more on your solar than you should have. That's the value prop. Ed, a lot of this for me, I started my career in the ad business, these are ads, right? These are ads that have a hook to them that make people go, damn, seriously? And a lot of that hook is why it matters to your audience. So again, I took, the ad guy in me said, man, people are overspending. Everybody doesn't want to overspend. Everybody gets freaked out about overspending. So let's lean in on overspending. Now that might be the wrong answer. The founder could look at me and say, yeah, that's cool, Will, but people spend $1,500 too much. It's not that much. But I'm guessing that's not the case.
Yeah. And just to highlight that. I was in advertising for a while, and I remember A/B testing for Windows. And the first one was you could be generate an extra whatever $300-400 in terms of savings for your household every year, and the other was you could be losing an extra $600 a year, and obviously the second one. So using that language, just as you said, Will, it's such a advantage. And we're here for you, everyone. Hey, founders, we are here for you. We will brainstorm with you. We will talk about this. Like, just bring it up. Now, next slide. Typically, everyone, you want to put a market slide. I'm not going to go into it. We've talked about this ad nauseum. So it's problem, solution, market. But let's get into how it works. This is typically the next slide. And it says, with Helios Nexus, homeowners just enter their address, electricity bill, get a solar quote in seconds. They can place an order, track each step of the installation, and check their system's performance. And then here are the 3 steps. Enter a little bit of repeat, select a package, and then place a deposit.
Okay. This kind of needs to map back to how this solves a problem.
Right.
Okay. The specific problem, kind of the challenge right now is we've laid out so many different problems. By the time we get to how it works, it's not always clear. Like in other words, none of this seems to solve the part of customer service. And we said that was a big issue.
Right.
Okay. So we just want to make sure that by the time we get to how it works, it's clear that this is we solve the most important thing that's important to a user. For example, in this case, the first thing I came away with was I get a quote fast, but I'm thinking to myself, that's good. Again, I've been through this process. It is a nightmare. But I thought to myself, but am I saving money? Do I get to see how much this is compared to what I would have paid elsewhere? Do I price compare?
Right. That's if we're solving for the problem of its inflated prices, right? And let me just demonstrate exactly what Will said. Now, if we're solving for the problem that I don't want to talk to a sales rep and I'd rather get it online, sure. But then it's like you could just say you get a quote online without having to talk to a sales rep. Right. And here's, how we're going to, it just demonstrates that we could go in pretty much like a dozen different directions on what's already been established here. And that's the problem with this deck.
Yeah. Look, I do understand the frustration of not being able to get a quote right away. Again, I've been through this. It is annoying, but not so much that like I'm going to change all my spending or my buying habits, because I don't really know that I don't get a quote in seconds from the other places until they don't give me a quote in seconds, right? So again, I'm definitely going to be compelled by price. I'm going to be compelled by clearer information, right? By choice is the word I'm looking for. If you can say, here are your 3 options, package A, B, and C, and here's why you would want to pick this one over that one, that would be compelling to me if I can't get that elsewhere. So I think we need to bubble a little bit more the value proposition to the surface.
Okay, but I do want to point out, Will, that at least from a mechanic standpoint, I'm going to point it out just because this is a takeaway that all of you can look at here. How it works, good. Then we got a summary sentence up at the top that talks about the customer experience, what they would want. It's not exactly where we think we're going to go or different things, but I'm just talking about the structure. And then you got a simple 1, 2, 3 steps on how the customer solves a problem and how we get to what I call the fairy tale ending, right? So as far as the structure is concerned, I'm okay with this slide. It's the content that's in it that is dubious for me.
Well, also, they repeated the content twice.
Right.
Everything that's in that top paragraph is also in the steps below. You don't get to do that. You have so little room to be able to put your information in. So what I would do is I'd move those screenshots up. I would have the caption 1, 2, 3 underneath the screenshots just to kind of show how those work, and have something in the summary sentence that talks about why the outcome is better. Users can save money in half the time without ever having to talk to a sales rep.
Yeah. And again, you are demonstrating, Will, that the investor wants to know that you know what the customer wants, right?
Yep.
That's the main thing.
Absolutely.
And if you can show that insight, then you are way ahead of everybody else.
You bet.
Okay, so now let's look at this. Now we come to the market opportunity slide, which is good. We got your favorite, Will, your Tam Sam Som. But hey, we do have a summary sentence up at the top, okay? Based on our bottom up, it's very clear because we harp on, don't do top down. So they just said, this is bottom up. 289,158 homes are ideal customers for solar. I don't know why. You're not explaining anything to me, but okay, moving on. And then we've got based on like 7 million homes that fall under filters. And then Sam, they want to go to North Carolina. I don't know why. Again, Som is based on the goal of capturing 10% of homes. Will, and I want you to comment on this common technique that we see in terms of saying, oh, if we capture 1% of this, we're all going to be rich. This whole calculating Tam Sam Som based on percentages. I'd like you to touch on that.
Yeah. No one wants to hear that you're only going to capture 1% of a market. It means you're irrelevant.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, right? You've never heard of a major company that owns 1% of their market, right? The idea that we're only going to capture a tiny bit of it implies that someone else is capturing way more and they're pushing you out. So don't fall into that trap. Also, if your business can be massive by only capturing 1% of a market, you're in too big of a market. that's also the other problem. Now, there are exceptions to this, right?
Sure.
But generally speaking, if you're talking about something as specific as solar, then 1%, 10% isn't going to be as meaningful. If you're talking about like a massive commodity like oil, like different story. Anyway, here's where I'm a little confused, Ed. At the top, it says 289,000 homes, but 6.9 million homes make them qualified customers. Can you make sense of that?
No, I don't. That's the reason I kept saying I don't know why you put those numbers up there.
Also, those are very specific numbers. Show me 6 million or 300,000.
Exactly.
300K or 6M, right? Or 7M, right? Round up for charity.
But I think what happened, because I see 289 here, right? And then this 289 here. I think they would have been better served, and I'm not saying this is the final answer, but it would have been better served that, we're going to focus on the 289,000 homes in North Carolina because,
Our backyard.
But eventually, we're going to be able to hit 7 million homes. I appreciate it's bottom line. At least I know how many homes are. It's not like they didn't say top down. The solar panel industry is, $3 trillion,
Right.
Type thing.
Yeah, but if it's 7 million homes, Ed, and on average they spend out $20,000. I made that number up. Why wouldn't you just say that U.S. homeowners are spending $17 billion on solar, and we're going to go after the 200 million that's being spent right now in North Carolina?
Yeah, that's the big mistake that people, that founders propagate using TAM, SAM, SOM. They automatically think, I'm just going to put this number in the TAM, and everybody's going to get it without any explanation. And you would be better served doing, what Will is advocating for, his method of just spell it out, just say it, and it's going to be so much easier. You don't have to worry about the investor kind of like getting confused like we did. Like, what exactly is this 5.8? All that stuff.
I think most people, when they go through this analysis, they're more concerned about trying to check the boxes of what they think TAM, SAM, SOM need to be versus trying to explain it in a very simple way. And that very simple way is just like this. There are this many people that could potentially buy this, but we're focusing on this many right now.
And this how much money that represents.
You bet.
Right there. Now, let me just say another thing in terms of saying, based on we're going to hit 10% and all those things. One is you have no understanding or justification on how you got to 10% of the number. You're basically just throwing something that you think, like Will said, is going to check the boxes to make the investor go, oh, that's really impressive, or I think that's doable. So if you're not actually putting any justification behind your percentage, I'm not going to believe you. And you've tipped your hand of being a founder that kind of, not all
You're just making shit up.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to be fair, we're going to cover what we think we're going to do financially on our last financial slide. So we don't even talk about it in the market size slide. It's irrelevant.
Next slide. Let's keep going here.
Hey, Ed, let me pause for a quick public service announcement to
the
founders. Thank you, founders who submitted their deck, allowed us to dig into it. This isn't easy to do, right? You're basically giving us your baby and saying, do with it what you please, right? And we don't take that lightly. And, Startups.com, when, the folks sit down with us with their decks, we don't tear into them. It's not our job. It doesn't bring us any pleasure. Our job is to figure out how to make it better. So when we're saying, hey, this needs to change or that's not covering that, what we're also saying is, hey, let's go figure it out. Let's go fix that for you. And so for the founders that shared the deck, again, thank you for that. But also remember, you just helped countless other founders who are going to watch this video, learn from it because you were brave enough to put your deck out there. So just want to say thank you.
Could have said it better myself. I ditto that. Next. Business model. Our business model is broken up into two areas: installation, maintenance packages, and economies of scale. We charge a standard rate per installation, and then we offer maintenance protection plans, and then use economy of scale with more systems sold. And this is where I get a little confusing, but to me, because that's not the business model, that's just unit economics. But if we just said, hey, they do two things per install, what they charge, and then protection plans.
What do they charge for the actual solar unit?
Well, I guess because they're only quoting, so I'm guessing that they've got manufacturers who are backing their quotes, and so they're just passing it straight through. So they're charging $2,500 to the manufacturing company. Not exactly sure.
I know. Well, they're charging $2,500 to the homeowner for the install. I get that part. That seems ridiculously low, by the way. I'm building a new house right now, and I can't get a light installed for $2,500.
Now, here's the confusion. When I read that, Will, I read that as I'm charging the manufacturer because I don't want the homeowner to have to pay above and beyond. I'm charging it kind of like, this is my service to you in selling your stuff.
Yeah, I get it. And I get the maintenance plan and stuff like that. But we have to be real clear here. What I like to do a lot in the business model is I like to have a little chart, just like a third maybe of the screen that has a breakdown to say, here's how much we charge. Here's what our meaningful costs are. Like if you have, cost of goods sold or something like that. And here's the margin that we get, right? Just so I can have a snapshot as the investor to be able to say, oh, okay, that's how this business works. So if Ed and I were pitching Uber back in the day, right? I would say, look, on average, a customer is going to spend about $35 on a ride. We're going to spend $20 to give to the driver. And the remainder we're going to have left over for marketing, acquisition cost, OpEx, et cetera. And it's just small. It's just a couple of numbers. But it gives me as the audience, as the investor, a real simple way to digest this. So here, Ed, what I would have done, I would have said average sale price is $28,000. We take $2,500 for install. We take $1,500 for maintenance, and the balance we pass directly to the manufacturer, which saves the customer a ton of money.
If that is indeed the business model, but
yeah,
I
made
would
that up.
Yeah, I'd be able to understand that. And that's the thing, Will. I know the founder is sitting there going, it makes so much sense in my mind.
Yep.
When I read it, it's kind of like this. Pause for a moment. Let's go take a little tangent, Will. You build homes. You're building a massive home. I've seen it. You're building it from scratch. Every single piece of furniture. You got a wood shop. That's your passion project, okay?
It is. Yeah.
Mine is writing a fantasy novel. So I'm working on that, right? And one of the things they tell me is read your stuff out loud. Because when you read it in your mind, it sounds fine. But when you actually read it out loud, you realize the words are janky, you're repeating stuff, you got long sentences, and you do that very same exercise with founders.
Yep, 100%. And I think it matters. And here's what happens. Every time you have your deck and you start putting it in front of other people, particularly the other founders, who are generally kind, by the way, in their response, the moment they start to read it, you start to cringe. You're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, right? I shouldn't have said that. And that's why you need to get it out of your head, out of your team's whiteboard, and into the wild, so that before it sees investors, so that you can get that initial just like you're seeing here. Yeah,
I've had reactions where I go, it really made sense in my mind, but that sounds really stupid. So now you take that, Will, to the nth degree.
Yeah.
And you have a tired investor who is looking through all these other types of decks. I got a message. I was asking an investor, and I said, how many decks have you looked at this week? 112.
Whoa.
112 decks.
That is so much work. The funny thing, Ed, I'm sure you have this trained muscle now too. When people send me their decks, to help them go through it, et cetera, the idea is, well, you probably need a couple hours to pour through this or whatever, or at least 20 minutes to go through it. And I'm like, honestly, I'll get through it in 60 seconds.
Exactly.
Right? Because you pattern match, right? This is what investors do. You look for clues. The moment you go through it, that tell you whether it's in the pile of trash, okay? Because a bad deck sticks out like a sore thumb. It doesn't even matter what the content is. The way it's presented, right? It's so obvious that it looks janky.
Well,
were you going to say something, Ed?
I'm so glad you said that, okay? Because I wanted to get something off my chest for a while.
Here it is.
Everyone, what Will just said, pattern matching, is why we advocate for the same standardized format of decks. I have so many founders say, Ed, why do I need to start off with the problem statement? I'm going to start off with a story statement or an executive summary, all those things. Because everyone, a lot of what we do, and it has shades of the Sequoia method. Sequoia really came out and sort of set the standard. Now, they're the biggest game in town. Will, you've actually done business with them, right?
Yep.
And so investors are just used to it. And so no matter how creative you think you are and how different your deck is going to be, literally an investor will go, I'm just used to seeing problem statements the first slide. And if I don't see a problem statement the first slide, I'm checking out already, and you don't want to take that chance.
And remember, you're competing, in this case, to that investor with over 100 other decks that week alone, okay? You may not be the best deck. What you don't want to be is clearly the worst deck. And everybody thinks that the best or worst has to do with the quality of their content. It is not, right? The layout, the presentation, I don't mean the graphics, the layout tells a story. An uncoached founder with maybe a decent idea, but a really shitty pitch deck looks like a shitty company. No different than when you go to a website and it was built in 1995. You don't think to yourself, yeah, but maybe it's a really good company. You think to yourself, this company sucks, and you move on. Same when you look at a restaurant and their awning is all like jacked up in the front, and it's in a strip mall, and you're like, hey, should we go here? And your spouse is like, nah, I think we're good. Like, let's keep moving on. You haven't even gone in the restaurant yet, but you pattern match. Restaurants with shitty awnings have shitty restaurants.
Yes, but Will, I just need the investor to get to know me, to have that conversation. I'm going to amaze them, blow them away. But everyone, first impressions matter so much. And yes, investors will spend time with you, and they will dig, and they'll want to generally be positive and start with good intent. But if you can't even get your foot in the door because you've presented something that they go, you know what, this is probably going to be a waste of my time, you're not going to get there.
Right. 100%.
Well, let's do 2 more slides. I want to try and
Okay.
fit them in lightning round here.
Yep.
Go to
right
market, embedding our proposal tool in contractors' websites, okay? Offering 0 dealer-free financing, and then launching a referral program. Those are the main points.
I understand putting on contractors' websites. I don't know, like, if they'd be willing to put it on their websites. I think that's a big ask. Offering 0 dealer fee financing to lower costs and increase solar adoption. That's like a whole other concept. That'd be a lot to explain. Wouldn't be easy to digest. And referral program rewards customers and partners. Nothing wrong with a referral program, but it's not much of a go-to-market. It's more of an expansion once we're already in market.
Right. So what I have issues with this is it's not really explaining to me your strategic insight. When you're doing it, it's just like a laundry list of what we're going to do. And again, the only thing that comes close is like, 0 dealer fee financing to increase solar adoption. And I understand the strategic thing of it, but now you're stretching so far, and I'm not going to believe you. It's really what it boils down to.
Here's what it comes down to. You don't have any customers right now. So how are you going to get your first 100 customers? If you said we're going to specifically drive door-to-door salespeople, but like if you were to say, here is our go-to-market plan where we're going to quickly be able to acquire customers, I know the founders here are relatively young, but getting a contractor to even update their website from 2014, much less add your proposal tool into it, damn near impossible.
My word. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, we'd want to massage this a little bit to say, hey, what's most likely going to get us our first 100 customers quickly? And let's kind of titrate to that focal.
Next slide, traction. In 6 months, we achieved the following milestones. Next, we are focused on enhancing proposal accuracy with AI, integrating AR for interactive customer experience. And then you've got a whole bunch of things.
We made it a good 6 slides without somebody mentioning AI. I think that this might be a record for the week.
Almost.
6 slides. We're kidding. It's kind of the running joke in our offices right now that like every single pitch we see has something to do with AI. Now, at some level, how could it not? I mean, it's so pervasive, but it is kind of funny how it just shows up everywhere. Ed, if you had to pick 2 of these traction points that would get you excited, what would they be?
Oh, man. Well, okay. So I'm going to break it down, Will, into the methodology. You always say you want to know state of the product and then customers and some growth. So that's what I'm looking for. And I would say we've launched is the first thing. And then the thing that highlights for me is, I see the number 600, but I also see onboard our first customer. There's a lot going on here, Will.
Here's what I think. Here's what I would remove. I love that they won the pitch competition. I love that, right? But I might not keep it. Give me a second.
Yep.
Launch version 2 of Helios. I would say that differently. No one knows what version 1 is, so no one knows what version 2 is, okay?
Exactly.
What I might say is, assuming version 2 had the ability to buy, I would say the app is now up and running to allow customers to buy instantly online. Cool.
Perfect.
Awesome. It's buy time. Great. The second one, onboarded our first customer. I would use the sale amount. Okay. So I would say generated $38,000 in sales from our first customer. Nobody needs to know that you're waiting HOA approval. And I don't care about partnering with 2 roofing companies, and I don't care about 600 people of feedback because you've already gotten a customer, so you don't need feedback anymore. I'm not saying you don't need feedback. I'm saying the threshold of customer validation, people giving you feedback is great, but you having an actual sale is much better. So I would focus on that. Maybe, Ed, I'm going to go with launch version 2, state of the product. I'm going to go with onboard our first customer, and I'm going to go with secured pre-seed funding by virtue of a business plan competition.
Yeah, you know what would really lock this in? In my mind, I'm thinking, well, if you've got your first customer onboarded, like where are the other customers? Like, can you get some traction momentum? At least spend a little bit of time before you present it to an investor to get that ball rolling, because that's going to do so much more for you in making this traction slide hit home. Also,
always represent your customers in terms of dollars, not number of customers. Okay.
It's great.
So if you said you've talked to 10 companies that would have interest in this product, what you want to say is we've talked to potential customers who have $290,000 worth of spending that they're ready to do.
I see this in all the best pitch decks. They say something, we're doing something, which equates to this amount of business. Yep. And that to me just hits home really well. Yep. Okay, well, so in general, I'm just going to scan through these slides one more time. In general, what would be your next steps for this founder?
Next step for the founder, we're going to go through the deck. We're going to streamline the deck. We're going to focus on just a couple of points that are by far the most important part of selling this opportunity. We're going to take all of the extras that don't make the top 2, and we'll talk about them later. Okay, we'll be less concerned with those. But what we want to be able to say is, again, if savings is it, or if time is it, we're going to focus on that one key point. We call it our North Star, and we're going to keep hammering that point on every slide throughout the deck.
Perfect.
Ed, what about you?
I say the same thing because, Will, we know everything starts, rises and falls on problem solution, right? And that's where we started going off the rails on this one. So streamline, pick, focus, and then the rest of the deck should take care of itself. And here's the other thing, my advice to the founder. If you've already got that one customer, there's clearly something good going on there.
Absolutely.
Focus on that, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
And a lot of times your traction will allow you to reverse engineer what story you want to tell because you're already successful at something.
Yeah.
Go with that and Godspeed. Will, what's your last encouragement to everybody out there in terms of, hey, what are some next steps for them, or what do you want them to take away?
I want them to take away that this is an iterative process. No one gets the deck done right in the first 50 attempts. And when people get to the 50th attempt, they're like, I must be the worst pitch deck developer of all time. No, this is what it takes to refine a giant idea. This is your big idea. This is how you're going to change the world. It takes a minute. You don't just sit down and write Stairway to Heaven your first time out, right? A little bit of practice there before you get to that final product.
We have a founder in the audience right now. You know who you are. She said to me, great founder, great product. Said, I gave her, answered her question. She said, now I have to go back to the drawing board. And I said, be prepared to do that hundreds of more times. You're doing the right thing.
That is our business. We're in the business of being wrong.
That's it for us. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us. Again, do the YouTube thing, like, comment, subscribe. Tuesdays, pitch decks. We're going to do again. Wednesday, traction hacking and growth strategies, getting customers. And then Thursday, Will is going to be back. We're going to be doing Q&A. We're going to have lively discussion. Join us then. Will, always a pleasure. I'll see you next time.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.